You are not just a material innovator. You are producer, you are supplier, you are distributor. So you have so many things to do. That means also you have to focus on what you're actually good at. And if you can integrate your material into existing infrastructure, everyone wins actually.
Welcome to HeroInside the Ingredient Branding Podcast with Tomas Vučurović. In each episode, Tomas will draw from his vast experience as the go-to global ingredient branding expert, and will discuss this subject with visionaries and pioneers in the field. How do you go from the zero position as a supplier of a new ingredient to the hero position in demand around the world? Let's find out.
Hello, dear listeners, and welcome back to the HeroInside podcast. My name is Tomas Vučurović, and I'm your host since January 2024, and I'm pleased to welcome you to our 13th episode. We are kicking off the third season with a highly emotional and also a bit controversially discussed topic, leather alternatives. These are materials often misleadingly referred to as vegan leather in public discussions. To dive into this topic, I have invited a leading expert, Mikael Eydt, co-founder of Beyond Leather, the makers of Leap, a next-generation leather alternative made from apple waste. Mikael participated in our first ingredient branding masterclass back in 2022, more than 3 years ago. At that time, Leap was still deep into the R&D and brand positioning stage. Today, it has become a recognized material innovation that is successfully collaborating with major brand partners, such as the iconic Danish furniture company TAKT. I'm really happy that our masterclass case has developed into a growing ingredient brand, and I'm looking forward to catching up with Mikael to hear about their journey so far, the surprises along the way, and how Leap is carving out its place in the next generation materials industry. Hi, Mikael. Welcome to the show. It's been a while since our 22 ingredient branding masterclass. So tell me, how have you been and what's happened in those 3 years?
Yeah, hi Thomas. Thanks so much for having me here today. And yeah, it's been a while, that's for sure. And 3 years in the startup world are maybe 10 years. And as it is always with startups, it's a roller coaster with a lot of ups and downs. Right now, we're going through a big up phase. And I think when we spoke in 22, Leap was still like an R&D case. Now we have actual products on the market made with Leap. So it's pretty exciting right now.
Super. So maybe you can tell our audience a little bit what got you first thinking about apple waste as a material. So where did that spark for Leap originated?
Yeah, I mean, Leap came out of a university project actually. So my co-founder, she was also looking into what can be done with waste. So the first idea was to use the apple waste and make some wall panels, more like art kind of stuff. But then we together looked into why not leather? I mean, I must tell you, like it didn't look like leather at all what we had there. It was like cardboard. So we just tested it as you should do in a startup. You just test your theories, see what comes out. And I built a very crappy website. And within 2 weeks, we got invited to the two of the big fashion houses in Paris. So we flew down there, showed them what we had, and they were not impressed. But they still were interested in it and really showed that they believe in the space, and that also gave us trust into moving in this direction and just experiment more. What could be done with waste? Can we show the actual beauty of waste by turning it into a high leather alternative material?
So that market for leather alternatives since then is growing quite rapidly, but we also know from our masterclass, every ingredient brand on the other side should stand for something very specific. So what would you say is Leap's core competence today? And what do you want designers, manufacturers, and end users to recognize when they hear made with Leap?
Yeah. I mean, what we stand for is making waste beautiful. That is what you should see in Leap. And then, of course, you can define what is beauty. Um, But first of all, it's a high quality material without compromises. That's often the issue when you hear alternative. You have to compromise in some way. You don't have to do it with Leap. That's what we really stand for, that you have a material that can be very close to traditional leather and look and feel, but it can also be like a carbon fiber optic if you want to actually. So it's a really the leading next gen material is what we're trying to create here.
Yeah, you started in as you said in 2017, right? Released some first samples in 2020, got ready for I think small leather good applications, then maybe around the time 22. And now finally you became fully industrialized last year. So it's a 7, 8 years journey. Were you surprised by the time it took? And if you knew then what you know now, would you have done anything differently?
Two times a big yes. I mean, it took way longer than expected. And of course, you're always smarter afterwards in hindsight. Many things I would have done differently. But I think that's also what is the exciting part about it, that you don't really know when you open a door where you get to, when you follow a certain path, what comes next. That's part of the startup journey. Yeah, and I expected us to be, on the market now 3 or 4 years ago, but it just always takes longer. And when you develop a new material, I think I heard at some point, new material development takes 5 to 6 years for corporates, with a lot of resources. So then imagine how much time it takes a bunch of or a group of a few people with not so many resources to develop a material. So I would say we're still on track. And yeah, I think so many things you learn along the way, but that's again part of it. You have to make mistakes to learn. You have to allow for mistakes. Otherwise, you're not getting anywhere.
And then October last year, you announced a partnership with a Copenhagen-based furniture brand TAKT, which I think is fair to say is kind of a breakthrough brand partnership because it is what I also call an A brand. I think it's very important, for ingredient brands to collaborate with the right partners and really have somebody who also brings a lot of credibility into the topic. So how did that partnership with TAKT influence your business since then?
Yeah, it's one I'm really proud of. I think the whole team is very proud of this partnership. And I mean, it was also a long journey. It was talks for 2 years towards the launch. But it also came from, when we talked in your masterclass, as you said, finding the right partner, because we had a lot of offers to also start within the furniture industry to find our first brand partner. But we chose TACT as the values are very much aligned. But also they have high quality demands. So they're selling not a cheap product. They're selling a high quality furniture pieces, right? Design pieces. So it's also for us raising the benchmark from the beginning, what we want to achieve with Leap. Yeah, the talks were a lot of ups and downs. And then it's also what is interesting there is that they had traditional leather they were using, and they wanted to have a vegan option. So it's not like they wanted to phase out leather. I think that's important. But I wanted to have a vegan option that is in look and feel, especially the color, very similar to what they have today. So we could work towards matching the color they like. And that is, of course, a challenge. But that's interesting with Leap that you can create deep color in our system. So it's not a flat, artificial looking material. It really has depth in the color. It's super important. And it's a journey, a lot of meetings, a lot of discussions. And at the end, it led to a launch in October. And we did also a co-launch. We had a talk together. We shared with architects what we were doing. How was the journey? We served Apple juice, of course. So it was a great event.
So total brand experience. But
Exactly.
there's another important aspect I want to point out with this TAKT partnership, and that is that they have introduced the material across a variety of products. Because that's also something we've identified in the masterclass and as a strong success factor for ingredient brands, that the carrier brands are offering a wide range of products. So it's not just a capsule collection or one style, but that I'm able to offer this through a wide range of different products. So I can select various chairs made with Leap. And How did you ensure that this is happening and it's not just a PR launch, as we have seen many in the past years, particularly with leather alternative materials?
It's a very good point. We had a brand, or we work with a partner. We don't say it's necessarily a customer. Those are partners for us, and we want to create the same thing. We want to create the same buzz. We want to tell the same story. And yeah, it doesn't help if you just say, okay, this is one chair we make. Here you go. There's some marketing behind it, but it's really like what the goal was to offer across their portfolio a vegan option that is very similar to leather. And we were very much aligned from the beginning, and it's super important. I mean, it doesn't really help you. It gives you some PR if you launch a capsule, but you're doing a material to have an impact, right? And there's now no cash flow coming in, or you don't know cash coming in from doing a capsule collection. That doesn't help you. It doesn't help anyone really in the long run.
Super. So brand partnerships like this are one thing, but for that to happen, you also need to establish a supply chain. And I think integrating a completely new material like LEAP into existing supply chains, machinery is a challenge. What problems or issues did you run into when trying to make it work with existing processes? And how did you solve it? And in that context, I also read and heard a lot about your collaboration with Weishin. Was that kind of a game changer to collaborate with them and their experience in processing next gen materials?
Yeah, I think Weishin and Joey was a good friend of mine, the founder of Weishin. They were playing a very big role in understanding the industry, or like also I think the general stakeholder mapping you have to do, because there's one thing is to develop a material and do ISO tests in laboratories, but how does it work when you make an actual product, the main manufacturing process? And then you have the next step, because you can make a prototype always that maybe works, but how is it then on an actual industrial scale? If I make one handbag and I have 10 hours to do that, whatever, I don't have that time to make 1,000 pieces. So you need to learn constantly. You really need to understand what is important for the brand and the touch and feel of the material, the design, but what is important for the manufacturer to actually make this happen, to bring this to life. That's key in my eyes. And then there's of course that part, but you also need to produce this material. So you need to understand your supply chain, as you mentioned. And we made a mistake. As I said, you have to learn from your mistakes. We tried to produce LEAP on our own. So set up our own manufacturing side, and we made that mistake. I made this mistake as a founder, and we had to pay heavily for it. It was not on a scale as some others did, luckily, so we could pivot. But I think that was important that you really set up the supply chain. You are not just a material innovator. You are a producer, you are a supplier, you are a distributor. So you have so many things to do. That means also you have to focus on what you're actually good at. And if you can integrate your material into existing infrastructure, everyone wins actually.
Yeah, I mean, it's also goes together with the price ranges that can be achieved. And if we look at some of the next gen materials that require greenfield manufacturing with a triple million euros or dollars investment, then it's also going to be difficult to stay in an accepted price premium range for sustainable materials of maybe 10, 15 or 20%. Then the big capex cloud is hanging over you, right?
Exactly. Like it's if you stand up every day and this is how much money I will burn today. And when you do such a big investment, your own manufacturing site, it's significantly higher, of course. And then if demand doesn't come, then you are in trouble. So I think it's a better way to stay lean and again focus on what you're really good at. And then you mentioned price. I mean, you can have the best material in the world, quality wise, or you can have the best story. If the price doesn't match the majority, where's the impact?
Yeah, that's true. Michael, as I already mentioned it in the introduction, there is a, say, controversial discussion surrounding the topic of leather alternatives or so-called vegan vegan leathers. And I'm following that topic since many, many years. And there are various aspects that are also often getting mixed with each other. But I would like just to get your point of view on the three main topics. And that is first the term leather, then the sustainability aspect of the materials, and finally the issue of animal welfare. Let's start with the term leather. Most dictionaries define leather as follows. It's a material made from the skin of an animal by tanning or a similar process. In some countries, which are important for fashion, like Italy, this term is also legally protected. So, in your opinion, should a material that is not made from an animal skin be allowed to be called leather? And how do you handle that at Leap?
It's a clear no from my side. I mean, as you just said, leather is based on an animal skin, material based on animal skin, and that just ends there for me. Let leather be leather. And we have to find as an industry our own terminology there. I think it's not completely set yet. I very much prefer the term next gen material. I think that matches well. I'm also completely against things like vegan leather or apple leather or whatsoever. I think it just doesn't help anyone. I understand why someone would like to use it, but we at Beyond Leather and me as a founder, we really don't appreciate that these terms. We actually have in our brand book that it's not allowed to communicate those in connection with Leap. We're very strict about that. Yeah.
I mean, it's a shortcut. We see it also in other industries, mainly in the food industry, right? It's vegan cheese, it's vegan milk, it's a vegan burger, it's a vegan steak. Also, one side, a lack of creativity to really define your own category, but it's also a shortcut, and it's a breeding ground on which you can build more easily or with less resources, some own equity by comparing it to something that is very much known by everybody. So it's maybe also a natural reflex by many who are going in this direction.
I mean, I understand why it's used. It's clear. I just don't. Yeah, I see differently there.
Okay, the next controversial discussion is about animal welfare and the impact that can be done. I think the general argument put forward by the leather industry is that leather is a waste product of the meat industry. And as long as the world is keeping cattle for meat, there will be always leather as a side product. Would you say that replacing leather with alternative materials can lead to greater animal welfare? And is that an argument in your brand narrative? How do you handle that in your brand book, the animal welfare part?
Yeah, I think there you have to differentiate also. Like there's also many different qualities for leather, and you can actually see that how the animal was raised. Like if it was raised super fast, right, fat, then you can see that in the skin at the end or the leather. But I have my take on this is that we have to move away from animal derived products no matter what. It's part of it is of course animal welfare, but also like to look at the climate change. It's clear that we produce most of the crops we're producing. We could feed 10 billion people on this planet if everything would be actually produced for humans and not to raise cattle or animals. Um, that's very important. And then going back to the animal welfare, you have to differentiate. I'm thinking about exotic skins, thinking about crocodiles. They are clearly, there are farms in Australia clearly just for the skin. So if you can make an exotic skin that comes to the quality level, let's call it like that, then why raise those animals in those tiny cages, right? That there's a clear impact there.
Absolutely. But as you said, also in leather, there's different qualities. We've worked for a tannery a couple of years ago where we also coined the term responsible leather in the sense of, they do the utmost on how the animals are breeded, how the transport is done, how the whole process is done. And that's a huge difference versus having cows being transported from Argentina or Brazil to China in a freight container to at the end then make leather goods out of such products. But I appreciate your view on those topics. So last point quickly here is on sustainability. Again, there are some arguments that it would be kind of madness for environmental reasons to burn 1 billion animal skins and replace them with artificially produced materials, particularly as many so-called vegan leathers still contain high proportion of plastic, as they require it for backing or coating. And I know that you have a very low share and you're constantly working on improving that. So what's your point on those critics? And I think you mentioned it already when you talked about TAKT. You probably more see the coexistence between animal leather and bio-based alternatives instead of competition.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you could see that out. I'm not a leather enemy or whatsoever. I clearly see a coexistence there. There's always, I think, will be customers who prefer a leather, and that's totally fine. Let's just raise the bar towards quality and transparency. I think that's a big impact we can have as a, yeah, let's say next gen materials industry, that we kind of push the benchmark towards transparency. That's very important for us at Beyond Leather. You mentioned it. Our material is 91% bio-based as of today. It's not 100% bio-based. It's also not, the goal right now. For us, it's important to have a high quality material for a price that makes sense, that is also scalable. And yeah, I think that it's clear. If I choose a new car and then someone wants leather interior, yeah, let's go with that. If it's maybe, as you mentioned, your client, someone who really takes care of the quality and can show the transparent supply chain, all of that, or someone chooses then, let's say, Leap in the future, where we can also show the transparency behind it, that's totally fine for me. I think there's also that it shouldn't be like that you constantly fight against each other. I can see on social media there's a lot of noise around that. It doesn't really help anyone, I think.
Yeah, I like your point of view. It's also a bit very Danish to say, it's this lagom, or I think lagom is Swedish, but it means this kind of this balanced approach. Um,
Yeah, I think again, what's the point? I think we all would like to have certain changes in the industries and push for it.
hygge is the Danish word, isn't it?
Hygge is the Danish one, yeah, but hygge means more like it's a little bit more peaceful. Like in Denmark, it's always cold and dark, so we like to have hygge. I like to have it comfortable in our homes,
Okay.
and approach many things like that.
Super. Michael, we already touched on it in our pre-discussion. The commercial environment is also challenging at the moment. Recently, the US-based company Natural Fiber Welding had to stop its operations, probably due to cost or scaling obstacles. And the consumer brands have also started to scale back their sustainability goals, prolong the time until they want to reach certain targets. And they also seem to be unwilling to pay a premium price for next gen or more sustainable materials because they hide behind the argument that the consumers would not be willing to pay more, which we can have a separate podcast about. How are you experiencing this situation right now? You said in the intro you are in an upswing, so that's great to hear.
Yeah, I mean, definitely things are very different compared to 5 years where money was for free, basically. But I would say brands are not as loud as they were before. It doesn't seem like they have to be. They can give themselves a little bit more time to find the right materials. I think there's still a big demand for next gen materials, also for lead. And we can see that across industries. Everyone who uses traditional leather or let's say synthetic leather is looking for an alternative. That's still the case. It's just not as noisy as it was before, I would argue. And yeah, as a material innovator, I mean, also for us, right, we're still a startup. So we still need to push hard and focus on our basics. Um, And that's where we see it with Leap. I call it my 4 pillars. It's also very basic stuff, right? You first have to set the quality for the brand. If you don't have the quality, what's the point? If you cannot match the price targets they have, if they have to charge a premium for it, you make it difficult for them. If you cannot scale it, you don't have a scaled production. That means also you have the organization behind it to keep the quality under control. That's the third. And then the fourth, if you don't have a story to tell, again, then what's the innovation, right? What's the change here? So all four need to be aligned in my eyes. It's basic stuff, but it's also very difficult to achieve, I admit. But we can see, give an example within furniture, you can clearly see that the B2C market is struggling. People are not buying furniture as much, but brands still do. So B2B or businesses still do. That's still growing. So you can see a shift there. But if you focus only on B2C, if you only sell fashion products, I think you're more in trouble, or it's more challenging. Let's say it like that.
Thank you. Can you give us also a glimpse into the future? So what's next at Leap? Are you planning to expand your customer base, approach new categories, or also, as you said, the material needs to develop further? What can we expect from you?
We have many plans, many ideas, a lot to learn still. I mean, now we have with our first version of Leap that targeted small leather goods, so handbags, accessories, and so on. That works very well. We have brands on the market. Very proud of that one. We are now in the furniture industry with our Leap Flex, we call it. That is used across furniture. Also upholstery. We have a cruise ship even where cafe was upholstered with Leap. And we're looking into every industry that where Leap could be applied. That could be aviation, that could be automotive, but we always, of course, try to keep, as I mentioned, these 4 pillars straight. So it doesn't help us to, for example, increase the buyer's content to 100%. We can do that today already, but then the quality is not following our benchmark. So you cannot sacrifice. That's what I believe in. But yeah, it's clearly that we want to build, let's say, an industry leader, a thought leader with Beyond Leather and with our product with Leap, our brand, and always have Gore-Tex as our North Star to build an ingredient brand like that. That is also my dream there.
Super. Thanks a lot for all of your insights. We are already at the end of this episode. I could, as always, continue to discuss with my guests a lot more and deeper. And we usually wrap it up by reversing the roles. So this time you can ask me a question or describe a challenge that's in your mind at the moment. Do you have something particularly related to ingredient branding where you are looking for an answer or that you are thinking a lot about?
How much time do we have for that one?
For the question or for the answer?
Both that, but I think we have maybe learned 1% of what there is to learn about ingredient branding. So I have many questions. What I have right now is so many brands understand what we're trying to do, but the bigger the brand gets, the more you have, I want to call it brand competition with the ingredient brand. So that is something I think we always need to navigate a little bit, where easy wins would be a question towards you. If you take a global brand and want to show them you have to use our startup brand. Of course, if you go with that mindset, you're already lost. But I think that's the main question. How do you make sure that a big brand doesn't see you as competition or doesn't want to use your brand, easily put?
Yeah, I think there's two sides or two parts of that question. Obviously, there is always this chicken and egg scenario at the beginning of an ingredient brand where you say, okay, nobody knows me, nobody loves me. How do I convince now my brand customers to take my brand on? And I think we've covered that in the masterclass, and you also explained it on the case of TAKT. Right. So at the beginning, you really need to find a few brand partners that believe in the fourth of your pillar, in your story. And then you need to prove the other three that you can make a quality product at scale for a good price. and you have those brands who believe in your values, in your story, and who are then willing to do what you did with TAKT last year. And that brings you to that tipping point where then other brands are coming and saying, oh, we also want to be a part of the journey. But we also see that often the point is, where's the brand awareness and attractiveness of the brand? As long as the brand partners are less known than the ingredient brand, then everybody wants to use the ingredient brand. And if the brands are more known than the ingredient brand, there is a tendency that they don't want to use the ingredient brand. But I think here a cardinal mistake from a lot of people who are approaching me or us at Brand is that they believe they can build a brand, an ingredient brand, without creating a consumer pull. At the end of the day, you must create your own audience that is demanding your product. So you're becoming that category leader for a certain application, like your next gen or leather alternatives, where people say, oh yeah, I heard about Leap, I like your story, and they're starting to demand your ingredient from the brands. And the brands on the other side need to understand if they want to change consumer behavior. So if they want to credibly expand their product range beyond leather and offer these alternatives, they need an ingredient brand as a proof point, as a quality stamp, as a seal, because you deliver that transparency. You're not only delivering the story, you deliver the transparency. And by integrating your ingredient brand into their communication and products, you lend to them the competence and the credibility. And this is the environment in which those partnerships needs to discuss. And I always said, remember in the masterclass, but also to all our clients, it's always very, very difficult to start with the biggest brands, not only because they have a certain vanity and a certain reflex of how they are trained at Nike or Apple, but also a lot of times, they're changing teams. They have a lot of turnover of people. And if you develop over a couple of years a project like you've done with TAKT, it's also important to have a stable organization, a stable team on both sides, and not every 18 months a new project leader or somebody who's reconfiguring the priorities on the brand level, and then you're getting kicked out and you start back at zero. So it's those elements that have to come together. And building your own audience, maybe just a final comment on that, does not mean you have to invest massively in TV advertising or large consumer campaigns. But there is you called it a stakeholder mapping. There's also a stakeholder mapping for your ingredient brand. Who are the people that need to know about you? These are journalists, these are influencers, these are critical consumers. And you have to define your set of that audience where you start to build awareness and attractiveness for your ingredient brand. And then those people are demanding it from the brands. And then slowly but surely you're getting there.
Yeah, very good point. B2B business, B2C branding.
Yeah, that's a very good final statement. Thank you so much, Michael. I'm so happy that out of this R&D concept with some first brand ideas developed a good startup that is on a successful journey. And I really love your comment that you are in an upswing in a moment where a lot of other companies are struggling in this next gen area. So good luck for the next couple of years. Hope to see you soon. Again, also maybe in person. And thanks for your time.
Thanks so much, Thomas. Thanks so much for having me here today and listening to the few things I've learned over the years.
That brings us to the end of today's conversation with Mikael Eydt from Beyond Leather. We explored how Leap has grown from an idea of transforming waste into something beautiful, the challenges of scaling a next-gen material, and the importance of strategic partnerships. Mikael's 4 pillars can truly guide other ingredient brands into a maybe less glamorous orientated but more pragmatic business development. Please share your insights and questions for this episode and head over to our Brand LinkedIn page and join the conversation. The link will be posted in the show notes too. Subscribe to the HeroInside podcast on your favorite platform to be sure not to miss the next episode. Please send us also your feedback and comments if you like. We are eager to hear about it. Until then, keep exploring, learning, and being a hero in your journey towards a better world.
This has been an episode of HeroInside the Ingredient Branding Podcast with Tomas Vučurović. Each episode features stories and wisdom from game-changing creators and the shapers of the world's most exciting and influential ingredient brand. To learn more about ingredient branding and Tomas's work, visit brained.co. That's BRAIND.co. Until next time.